Captain Riot Jackson believed there were two universal truths. You can't rush good barbecue, and you should always, always let your enemy think they're smarter than you. Right now, the second truth was far more pertinent, though he was really starting to miss the first. He swirled a plastic spork through the syrupy contents of a tin can, the metal scraping faintly against the sides. The sweet, cloying scent of preserved peaches filled the crammed bridge of the SS Chucklefuck. Capacities for grid 7 through 12 are fully charged, Zero reported from the pilot station, a voice a flat, calm line in the tense quiet. Main reactor is masked and running at 15% nominal output. All green on my board. To her right, a chaotic mess of limbs and wires vibrated with pent-up energy. Glitch Petrova, her face illuminated by the glow of a dozen monitors, pushed a pair of greasy goggles up onto her forehead. Masking profile is holding, Captain. Scans are clean. They think we're a flying garbage scow, with a crew of 12, a leaky plasma conduit, and a cargo hold full of agricultural protein paste. The fools! A manic grin split her face. They're gobbling up the bait like it's free donuts at a cop convention. A deep rumble, more felt than heard, came from the back of the fridge. Ready, Brick Talos said. The single word was a promise of finality. He stood with his arms crossed over a chest as wide as a blast door, his gaze fixed on the main view screen. On that screen, a pirate frigate, a jagged beast of mismatched plating and oversized weapon emplacements, called Cathar's Fang, was closing fast. A hail request blinked insistently. Riot took a slow, deliberate bite of a peach slice. He chewed, swallowed, and then sighed, a picture of weary resignation. He keyed the comm. This is Captain Barlow of the cargo freighter Starlight Dreamer, Riot said, his voice pitched high with manufactured panic. We're on a registered mercy mission. We have no weapons, no valuables. Please, we're just simple haulers, trying to make a living. A crackle of static, then a voice like grinding rocks boomed back. Silence, human filth. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with atomic fire. Riot let out a shaky, pathetic whimper that was a true work of art. He cut the comm and looked at his crew. Zero, give them a little engine flare. Like you're, fumbling the shutdown. Zero's fingers danced over her console. Fumbling? She confirmed. Her tone suggested it was a physical impossibility for her. Riot set his peach can down. Glitch, you got their comm frequency? Like a bad rash, Captain. I'm so deep in their system I could change their lunch menu to nothing but celery. Excellent, Riot said, a thin smile touching his lips. Let the party begin. On the bridge of Cathar's Maw, the flagship of the Void Claw Syndicate, Warlord Cathar threw his massive scaly head back and roared with laughter. The sound was like an avalanche in a quarry, shaking the very deck plates. Did you hear it? He bellowed, slamming a four-fingered fist on his command throne's armrest. Starlight Dreamer. They name their ships like they're writing poetry for children. Pathetic. His enforcer, Grak, stood at a tactical console, his ridged brow furrowed. Grak was a Fazor, a species known for their tactical acumen and brutal efficiency, but his instincts were screaming at him. Warlord, the scans are perfect. Cathar stopped laughing and glared at him, his yellow eyes narrowing. Perfect is good, Grak. It means their shields are down, and their reactor is trash. No, Warlord, Grak said, choosing his words with the care of a man walking through a minefield. I mean it is a statistically perfect match for a T-class
freighter in distress. The energy fluctuations, the hull composition bleed through, the phantom life signs. I've cross-referenced it against the Gnarlian merchant fleet's public database. It matches distress profile 7 gamma to a 90.98% certainty. No real ship is that textbook perfect. It feels constructed. It's an anomaly.
Cathar rose from his throne, his shadow falling over his lieutenant. He was a grok, a species that looked like a union between a crocodile and a boulder, and he radiated raw, contemptuous power. An anomaly. I'll tell you the anomaly, Grak. The anomaly is a human ship, a remnant of a dead empire, daring to fly through my nebula. You've grown soft, paranoid. You see ghosts where there are only sheep. He jabbed a clawed finger towards the view screen, where the small, sad-looking freighter floated obediently. Take the Fang. Take your best warriors. Board that ship.
Yes, Warlord, Grak affirmed. The Fang is maneuvering to attach the boarding tube now.
Boarding tube? Cathar scoffed. Why not the teleporter? Are you afraid to make a sudden entrance?
Warlord, teleporting into an unknown vessel with active power, however weak, is a tactical risk. Scramblers, shield flickers, unexpected gravimetric shear. It can lead to catastrophic molecular displacement. A hard breach via the tube is slower, but it is the correct, safer approach.
Cathar sneered.
Safer? You sound like a bureaucrat, Grak, not a conqueror. Fine. Use your tube. Crawl aboard their little garbage scow. Bring me the captain's head, and whatever trinkets their pathetic race clings to. And Grak.
Cathar leaned in, his foul breath watching over the enforcer.
If you hesitate again, I will find a new enforcer who is not afraid of shadows.
Grak's mandibles clicked in a gesture of submission. Yes, Warlord. He turned and strode from the bridge, his professionalism a thin mask over a deep gnawing unease. Cathar was a force of nature, but he was a stupid one, and stupid forces of nature had a bad habit of getting people killed. The clang of the boarding tube locking onto the Chucklefuck's hull was the starting pistol. Inside the primary airlock antechamber, the misfits were a study in deadly calm. Brick stood before a large, innocuous-looking panel labeled Emergency Decontamination Systems. He methodically checked the pressure gauges on a series of canisters hidden behind it. The canisters themselves were labeled Foam Agent 9. Glitch was a blur of motion at a portable console, her fingers flying across the holographic keys. A wicked, joyful grin was plastered on her face.
Party favors are armed and ready, Captain. Lullabies queued up. Heard like projectors are spooled. Oh, this is going to be a data-rich environment.
Just try not to brick, central nervous system before we get what we need. Zero's voice came over the private comms, crisp and dry from the bridge.
No promises.
Glitch chirped back. Riot stood in the center of the room, observing the final preparations. He had retrieved his can of peaches and was spearing the last slice. He popped it into his mouth, chewed with thoughtful satisfaction, and then crushed the can in one hand. He dropped the mangled tin. It hit the deck with a final, lonely clatter. Showtime! The outer airlock door didn't open. It exploded inward, ripped from its hinges by a shaped charge. Grak, flanked by 24 of the most savage warriors in the Voidclaw Syndicate, stormed through the smoking breach into what the scans had identified as the main cargo bay. The space was cavernous, dimly lit by flickering emergency lights. The air tasted stale and metallic. A profound, unnerving silence hung over everything, broken only by the sound of a discarded noodle cup rattling somewhere in the darkness. Strange, angular containers, unlike any standard shipping crates Grak had ever seen, were stacked in bizarre, inefficient patterns. "Fan out," Grak commanded, his voice low. "Thermals on. What your set is? Something is wrong." His warriors spread through the bay, their heavy pulse rifles held at the ready. They were predators, apex predators, but the silence was getting to them. It felt deliberate. As the last of his Vizor shock troopers passed the threshold, the massive blast door behind them didn't just close, it slammed down with the force and finality of a guillotine, shaking the entire deck. A heavy thump clank of magnetic locks engaging echoed throughout the bay. They were sealed in. The emergency lights didn't just flicker out, they died in unison, plunging the cargo bay into absolute suffocating blackness. And then, from hidden speakers all around them, a sound began to play. It was soft, tiny, and utterly alien to the Vizor warriors, a simple, melodic tune, a human child's lullaby. "They've switched to thermal vision, just as the profile predicted," Glitch announced from the bridge, her eyes wide with predatory delight. "Oh, they are so wonderfully predictable." "Let them get a little deeper," Riot said calmly. Watching a schematic of the cargo bay, red icons representing the pirates were moving cautiously forward. "Let them think they have the advantage." Grak's voice, filtered through Glitch's comm taps, was strained but controlled. "Ignore the noise. It's a psychological tactic. Advance to the secondary door. Maintain formation." "Okay, I'm bored now," Glitch declared. "Activating phase 1 of the funhouse." She slapped a large, glowing button on her console. Down in the cargo bay, Grak and his team were advancing down a wide corridor that, according to the schematics they'd stolen from a dozen other freighters of this class, should lead directly to the engineering section. Then the world folded. The floor in front of them abruptly angled upwards, becoming a steep, smooth ramp. The wall to their left dissolved into a shimmering curtain of light before reforming as another corridor, identical to the one they were in, but branching off at an impossible angle. The ceiling fractured, showing a mirror image of themselves looking down from above. "What is this sorcery?" one of his warriors snarled, his thermal vision going haywire as the hardlight projectors created false heat signatures and ghost-like apparitions. He took a step forward and walked directly into a wall that had materialized out of thin air. He grunted, stumbling back. Their comms, which had been clear a moment before, erupted in a cacophony of static, feedback, and weaving through it all, Glitch's distorted, mocking laughter. "Formation broken," Zero reported coolly from the pilot seat. "They're separating." "Perfect," Riot murmured. "Time to start thinning the herd." A squad of 5 burly grok pirates, deciding that subtlety was for lesser beings, located what their limited schematics identified as a maintenance access door. Ignoring Grak's frantic, static-laced orders to regroup, their leader smashed the lock with the butt of his rifle and kicked the door in. They found themselves in a narrow, brightly lit service corridor. On the bridge, Brick watched the 5 red icons on his monitor enter the corridor. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply observed. "Hey, Brick!" Glitch's voice piped up over his station speaker. "Those are the guys who used that nasty corrosive spit, remember? The Vevis section's report says it dissolves standard plasteel. Nasty." Brick grunted in acknowledgement. He placed his thumb on a large green button on his console. In the corridor, the lead pirate grunted. "See? Easy. This way to the reactor." He took 2 steps forward, and then the nozzles in the ceiling hissed. It wasn't a gas. It was a thick, white, rapidly expanding foam. It shot out in dense streams, instantly covering the floor. "What is this?" the pirate growled, trying to pull his foot back. The foam was unbelievably sticky. It clung to his armored boots like industrial glue. "Decontamination foam," Brick said quietly to himself. He watched the 5 heat signatures on his screen begin to flash frantically. The foam wasn't just sticky, It was a potent, corrosive agent specifically designed to react with grok chitin. Screams, high-pitched and full of agony, echoed briefly before being muffled by the expanding foam. It filled the corridor from floor to ceiling in under 10 seconds. On Brick's monitor, the 5 red icons flickered, then vanished one by one. He calmly lifted his thumb from the button and used it to wipe a tiny, imaginary smudge from the corner of his screen. "Clean," he muttered. Grak had managed to rally a dozen of his remaining warriors. The hardlight maze had disoriented them, but his iron will had pulled them back from the brink of panic. They had blasted their way through a bulkhead and found themselves in what looked like the ship's mess hall. Tables were overturned, and food trays were scattered across the floor. It felt real. It felt solid. A welcome respite from the shifting madness of the corridors.
Hold here, Grak ordered, panting. Check your ammo. Re-establish comms. We need to find a way to the...
Riot's voice, calm and conversational, suddenly echoed through the room from the ship's internal address system. "Hey, Glitch! You sure that data from that captured Gunarlian psychologist was accurate? The one about species-wide latent phobias?" A cheerful feminine giggle answered him, loud enough for all the pirates to hear.
"Oh, absolutely, Captain. Their greatest primal fear, passed down genetically for millennia, isn't predators or darkness. It's parasitic infestation, specifically the Cathar worm, which gestates inside a living host before bursting from their ocular cavities. Fascinating stuff, really."
Grak's blood ran cold. He saw the vents in the ceiling. He heard the gentle, almost imperceptible hiss.
"Masks on!"
he roared, but it was too late. A fine, colorless, odorless aerosol was already swirling around them. It wasn't a poison. It was something infinitely worse. The Vazal warrior to Grak's right suddenly screamed, dropping his rifle. He clawed at his own face, his eyes wide with terror. "It's inside me! I can feel it moving!" Another pirate started shrieking, pointing a trembling claw at his comrades.
"His eyes! God, his eyes are bulging!"
To the rest of them, the warrior looked perfectly normal. But in his own mind, and in the minds of his terrified squad mates, his flesh was writhing. Phantom parasites, tailored perfectly to their deepest racial nightmare, were crawling under their skin, squirming toward their skulls. Chaos erupted. They turned on each other, firing their weapons wildly at imagined horrors. A grok warrior, convinced his squad mate was about to burst open in a shower of worms, blasted him at point-blank range. The mess hall became a carnal house of friendly fire and gibbering madness. Grak, whose helmet filters had managed to block most of the aerosol, watched in horror as his elite soldiers slaughtered each other over phantoms. Cruel. Zero's voice noted over the misfits' comms. "Effective," Riot countered softly. "Fear is a weapon, Zero, and we just turned it back on them." 4 of these smarter pirates, a nimble species of reptilian hunters called the Sliss, had avoided the main group and the foam trap. They moved through the ship's superstructure using service ducts and ventilation shafts they pried open with their claws. They were silent, efficient, and they were getting close to what their energy scanners told them was a secondary power conduit, a perfect target for sabotage. They dropped down from a ceiling grate into a brightly lit maintenance bay. The bay was clean, orderly, and populated by a half-dozen unassuming boxy droids on treads. The droids were polishing deck plates and sorting spare parts into bins. They were labeled J-Series custodial drones. The Sliss leader hissed a quiet command, and they crept forward, weapons raised. The droids were a non-threat. Then, in perfect unison, all 6 droids stopped what they were doing. They swiveled their optical sensors to face the intruders. With a series of swift mechanical clicks and whirs, their cleaning appendages retracted. Polishing buffers were replaced by whirring, high RPM plasma cutters. sorting claws unfolded into compact, tri-barreled auto-turrets. A red targeting laser snapped on from each one, painting the forceless in a crisscrossing pattern of crimson light. The lead pirate had just enough time to widen his eyes in disbelief before the bay erupted in a storm of plasma bolts and high-velocity slugs. The encounter was brutally efficient, shockingly brief, and left behind nothing but scorched silhouettes on the far wall and a fine layer of vaporized reptilian mist. A moment later, the weapons retracted. The polishing buffers and sorting claws returned. The janitor bots went back to their work, one of them methodically sweeping the new scorch marks on the floor. Grak was alone. He was wounded, his armor was scarred, and his mind was reeling from the horrors he had witnessed. But he was an enforcer of the Void Claw. He was fury and iron. He would not break. He had found a direct, unblocked corridor leading to the bridge. The final prize. The source of this nightmare. He could see the blast door at the far end. He pushed off the wall and began to run, his heavy boots pounding on the deck plates. He would die, but he would die taking the human captain with him. 20 meters. The corridor remained silent. 10 meters. His heart hammered against his ribs. It was too easy. 5 meters. He braced himself for the final charge, ready to smash through the door. On the bridge, Zero sighed, a long, weary exhalation of pure, unadulterated patience. "Amateur," she muttered. She tapped a single key. Grak's world tilted sideways. The crushing weight of a star descended upon him. Zero had activated a localized gravity plate set into the floor of the corridor, tripling the normal gravitational pull in an instant. His legs, evolved for a 1.2 G environment, buckled immediately. His forward momentum carried him, but not upward. He slammed face first into the deck with a sickening crack of bone and armor. The air was forced from his lungs in a pained grunt. He was pinned, unable to even lift his head, his own mass a prison. A small wheeled bot no bigger than a toolbox scurried out from a low panel in the wall. It zipped over to his prone form and, with a gentle hiss, injected his exposed neck with a powerful sedative. As darkness swam at the edge of his vision, Grak fumbled with his comm unit, bypassing the local static. He had to warn the Warlord. He had to make him understand. "Warlord, Thaw!" he rasped into his helmet mic. His voice a desperate, fading whisper. "It's a lie! The whole ship, it's a lie! Warlord, do not board, it's a..." The sedative took him, and his transmission dissolved into a final burst of static. Warlord Cathar listened to Grak's final, pathetic transmission, and his lips curled back from his teeth in a sneer of utter contempt.
"He died whining,"
Cathar growled, the sound vibrating through the bridge of the moor. One of his new sub-commanders, a younger grok named Vorlag, dared to step forward. Warlord, perhaps Enforcer Grak's warning holds merit. He was our best. If he fell..." Crack. Cathar's backhand sent Vorlag sprawling across the deck, spitting green blood.
"Grak's warning was the final testament of a coward. He let a handful of human bilge rats outsmart him, and died afraid of his own shadow."
The Warlord pointed a massive claw at the tactical display. The human ship was still there, silent and seemingly dead in space. The path Grak had taken to the bridge was now clearly visible on their short-range scans. It was empty, unobstructed. Cathar's monumental ego filled in the blanks. The humans had thrown every cheap trick they had at Grak's elite team. They had exhausted their pathetic little traps. Now they were huddled on their bridge, terrified, out of options. The path was clear because they had nothing left. It was the only logical conclusion for a mind that could not conceive of being outmaneuvered.
"He spent all their tricks on him,"
Cathar roared, his voice filled with triumphant certainty.
They are weak, my personal guard. With me, we will use the teleporter. No more crawling through tubes.
But Warlord, Volek stammered, clutching his bruised jaw. The risks Grak mentioned.
Grak is dead,
Cathar bellowed.
His cowardice died with him. The ship is crippled. Their tricks are spent. The risk is zero. I will tear this human captain's spine out with my own hands.
He and his 12 most formidable guards stormed to the teleporter room. Moments later, they materialized in a flash of brilliant light in the corridor outside the Chucklefuck's bridge. It was silent, empty, exactly as he'd predicted. With a final bellowing war cry, Cathar himself fired a shoulder-mounted rocket that blasted the bridge door into molten slag. He charged through the smoke and fire, his guards fanning out behind him, weapons ready to annihilate the cowering humans. They found one man. Captain Riot Jackson was sitting in the command chair, which was slightly reclined. He was holding a fresh can of peaches and his spork. He took one last leisurely bite, set the can down, and looked up at the enraged 7-foot-tall reptilian warlord. "Took you long enough," Riot said, his voice as calm as a summer pond. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Welcome to humanity, asshole." Cathar let out a guttural roar of confused fury.
You mock me. You are alone. You are dead."
"Alone?" Riot raised an eyebrow. He tapped a single, unassuming control on his armrest. "Not exactly." In that instant, every single monitor on the bridge of Cathar's Maw and on every other ship in the Voidclaw fleet flickered. The tactical displays showing the single human freighter were replaced with a live feed from inside the Chucklefuck. The pirate fleet watched in stunned silence as they were shown high-definition replays of their finest warriors being systematically and horrifyingly dismantled. They saw the hardlight maze, the confusion, the terror. They saw the corridor fill with corrosive foam and the heat signatures of their brethren wink out. They saw their comrades turning on one another in a paranoid, hallucinogenic frenzy. They saw the janitor bots activate their hidden weapons and execute the sliss with cold, mechanical precision. They saw their vaunted enforcer, Grak, crushed by gravity and sedated like a misbehaving pet. A wave of shock and disbelief rippled through the entire fleet. This wasn't a battle, it was an extermination. Cathar stared, his jaw slack, his arrogance finally cracking.
What is this?"
"That," Riot said, his voice hardening, "was the welcome mat, the invitation to the party." He gestured with his chin towards the main view screen, which still showed the empty starfield around them. "But you seem to have misunderstood the scope of the event. You thought you were attacking a lone human starship." He leaned forward, his eyes locking with Cathar's. "It was just the one we let you see." On the view screen, the stars began to change. Patches of empty space, indistinguishable from the blackness around them, began to shimmer. Asteroids that had been nothing more than inert rocks on sensors suddenly shed holographic cloaks. Dozens of what looked like derelict freighters and forgotten orbital debris fields flickered, their forms resolving into sharp, angular, weaponized silhouettes. One by one, then by dozens, then by hundreds, they appeared. Terran Alliance warships, cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and frigates. A ghost fleet, a hidden armada, emerging from the shadows of Vextral Nebula. The trap wasn't the ship was just the bait. The entire nebula was the trap. The silent awe was shattered by the roar of plasma and the thunder of mass drivers. The newly revealed Terran fleet opened fire in a single coordinated, devastating volley. The unprepared, disorganized Voidclaw ships were hammered. Shields that weren't fully raised buckled and failed. Hulls designed to intimidate not to withstand a concentrated military barrage, were cracked open to the void. The pirates' comm channels, once filled with boasts and laughter, became a screaming chaos of panic and contradictory orders. On the bridge of the Chucklefuck, Riot calmly put down his empty peach can. He reached into a small pouch on his belt and pulled out a long, dark strip of spiced beef jerky. He took a slow, satisfying chew. The planning phase was over. The folksy drawl vanished from his voice, clipped away and replaced by the cold iron of command. Strike Group Alpha. Execute Maneuver Epsilon 7. Hit them on their dorsal side. They've rerouted power to ventral shields. 0, target the Muzz primary weapon capacitors. Glitch, give me a full tactical overlay of the pirate fleet's comms network. Brick, prepare for counterboarding protocols. The commands were a cascade of precise, undeniable logic that left no room for hesitation. The Vextral Nebula had just learned a very old, very human lesson. The most dangerous predator is the one you mistake for prey. Give me a heartburn, 0. I want to get cozy with the big boy. Acknowledged, Captain, 0 replied, her hands a blur on the controls. The Chucklefuck jinked through a storm of panicked, inaccurate return fire, its small size and 0's preternatural skill making it an impossible target. The massive flagship, Cathar's Maw, loomed before them, its shields flickering under the sustained assault from the Alliance fleet. They're trying to bring the spinal lance online, 0 reported, her voice as steady as ever. Amateur move. Leave their ventral radiator fins exposed. Exploit it, Riot ordered. The Chucklefuck dove, rolling under the behemoth's belly. With a jarring shudder, heavy magnetic grapples fired from its hull, sinking deep into the flagship's exposed superstructure. A series of loud clangs echoed through the ship as they locked into place. We're attached, 0 announced, like a remora on a very ugly, very angry shark. Riot took another bite of his jerky. Good. Time to deliver the return package. The Misfits moved as one. The lockers that had looked like standard storage units now stood open, revealing racks of sleek, black combat armor. In seconds, they were geared up. Winning this battle isn't enough, Riot said, his voice flat and hard as he snapped a fresh power cell into his rifle. This syndicate is a cult of personality. To break them for good, we have to cut the head off the snake and show the body. Glitch, I want a live feed of the warlord's face when we get to his throne room. Broadcast it to his entire fleet. With pleasure, Captain. Glitch grinned, her fingers already dancing. Brick, now carrying a rotary plasma cannon that whined with barely contained energy, aimed a breaching charge at the hull section they were clamped to. Breaching, he stated. The charge blew a perfect circle in the flagship's hull. Hot, acrid smoke billowed in. The Misfits flooded through the opening into a corridor vibrating with the thunder of nearby explosions. Panicked Grok warriors, their armors streaked with grime and fear, turned to face them. The air instantly filled with the sharp ozone smell of plasma bolts and the percussive thump, thump, thump of their own armored boots on the deck plating. Brick stepped forward, the high-frequency whine of his cannon spooling up to a deafening roar as he carved a path through the enemy ranks. He was less a man and more a moving wall of irresistible force. Glitch danced through the chaos, tossing small discs that pulsed with an eerie blue light. They weren't explosives, they were scrambler grenades. They detonated with a soft pop, releasing a wave of energy that left the air feeling cold and clammy. Every pirate weapon system in a 10-meter radius shorted out with a fizzle of sparks, their comms filled with ear-splitting screeches. 0 moved with an impossible 0-G grace honed by years in the pilot's seat. 2 precise shots from her high-precision pistols, and 2 pirates dropped with disabling wounds to their weapon arms. The coppery scent of their green blood momentarily cutting through the smoke. No wasted motion, no collateral damage. Riot was the director of the symphony, Glitch, left flank. Suppress that heavy repeater. Brick, forward. Create an opening. 0, watch our 6, he commanded, his own rifle barking in short, controlled bursts, picking off targets of opportunity and forcing the enemy back. They weren't just fighting. They were an organism, a single entity of destruction flowing through the arteries of the enemy ship. And the pirates were nothing but disorganized antibodies, swept aside with contemptuous ease. "I'm in," Glitch cackled. Her data spike plunged into a primary command conduit. Her goggles were down, her eyes darting back and forth as she tore through the pirate ship's pathetic firewalls. "Oh, this is cute. They're using a recursively encrypted command channel. It'll take me at least 4 seconds to break it." She typed a furious cascade of code. And we're home. Across the entire Void Claw flagship, the panicked, bellowing orders from Cathar's remaining officers were abruptly cut off. The internal comms and view screens flickered to life, but instead of tactical updates, they showed the highlight reel Glitch had prepared. Cathar's warriors dying in the chucklefuck, now set to an ancient, ridiculously upbeat human pop song. The cheerful synthesized melody of "Walking on Sunshine" filled the ship. Pirates stopped in their tracks, their will to fight draining away as they watched their supposedly invincible brethren being humiliated and destroyed, all to a soundtrack of insipid, joyful music. Morale didn't just break, it shattered into a million pieces. From behind a barricade, Zero executed a perfect takedown on a pirate trying to flank them, then holstered her pistol. Over their private comms she sighed. "I hate that song." "I know," Glitch replied happily. "Isn't it perfect?" The bridge of Cathar's Maw was chaos. The warlord was roaring at his few remaining guards, blaming them. His navigators, the universe, anyone but himself. The doors hissed open, and the misfits stepped through. Cathar's personal guard, the 12 supposedly deadliest warriors in the Syndicate, turned to face them. They lasted less than 10 seconds. Brick's cannon swept 3 of them away in a torrent of white-hot plasma. Zero's pistols took down 4 more with surgical precision. Glitch's latest toy, a grenade that created a zone of frictionless air, sent the rest sliding helplessly into a bulkhead with comical, bone-jarring force. Cathar stood alone, his massive plasma rifle in his hands. He leveled it at Riot.
"Human,"
he roared.
"You will die."
"You know," Riot said, not even raising his own weapon, "for a guy who rules a whole nebula, your throne is surprisingly tacky. Is that real gold, or just plated?" The taunt was so absurd, so dismissive, that Cathar actually hesitated for a fraction of a second, his mind struggling to process the insult. That was all Brick needed. The big man moved with a speed that defied his size. He didn't attack Cathar, he tackled him. The impact was like a freight train hitting a wall. The warlord was lifted off his feet and slammed back into his own command throne, with enough force to crack the armored shell. Before Cathar could even register what had happened, Brick raised a restraint launcher. A series of thick metallic bands shot out, wrapping around the warlord and his throne, pinning him to it like an insect in a collector's case. He was trapped, immobilized on his own seat of power. The broadcast changed. Glitch switched the feed from the humiliation reel to a live, high-definition shot of Warlord Cathar, the great and terrible leader of the Void Claw, webbed to his own throne, struggling uselessly. The image was sent to every ship in his fleet. The effect was instantaneous. In a feudal syndicate built on the singular pillar of a leader's strength, the sight of that leader utterly defeated and humiliated was a death blow. The fighting stopped. One by one, pirate ships powered down their weapons and began broadcasting surrender signals. A few tried to flee, only to be effortlessly disabled and herded by the waiting Terran cruisers. The battle for the Vextral Nebula, a conflict military analyst had predicted would take months and cost thousands of lives, was over in less than 3 hours. The Terran Alliance had returned to the galactic stage. not with a whisper, but with a thunderclap that would echo through every corner of the galaxy. The bridge of the captured Cathar's Maw was a mess, but it was a triumphant mess. The misfits had spent the last hour indulging in some well-earned looting. They had piled gilded data pads, jewel-encrusted weapons, and chests of rare minerals into a haphazard, glittering mound where the command throne used to be. Atop this makeshift throne of plunder sat Captain Riot. He had a bottle of premium Terran whiskey in one hand and was pouring generous measures into 4 mugs. He passed one down to Brick, who was methodically polishing a massive, wickedly curved pirate axe with a soft cloth. He handed another to Zero, who stood by the main view screen, a rare, small smile gracing her lips as she watched the orderly procession of aligned ships securing the nebula. Glitch, vibrating with a post-victory sugar high, was already at a console, yelling into the comm, "Yes, that's what I said! I want 4 dozen Malthusian space waffles, extra syrup, delivered to these coordinates. And a case of that, carbonated Zaxian Beetlejuice. The good stuff, not the diet version." Riot raised his mug. "To a job well done," he said, his voice back to its usual easygoing drawl. "To proving that a big stick is no match for a well-placed banana peel." They all raised their mugs. Brick grunted in agreement. Zero nodded, her eyes still on the stars. Glitch cheered, nearly spilling her drink. They drank as the light of a new dawn. The dawn of a new human era broke across the Vextral Nebula. The galaxy had forgotten what humanity was capable of. It was about to get a very loud reminder.